When the people arrived in the valley, they found that the lake was still frozen. There were only a few places where there was open water. There were still banks of snow where the direct rays of the sun could not reach and melt them. The great mountains were covered with snow. Soun rode near the herd of horses, helping keep the thousands of animals moving in the right direction. He looked at all the familiar sights on the way through the high valley. It was warm, sunny. The grass was a deep green. Early spring flowers were in bloom. The ground was moist. The smells of spring were everywhere. It was exciting to be back. A lot of work was waiting for the Wolawanes Pierce villagers as they rode up to their summer home sites. Stored lodge poles were taken and put up on familiar ground. Mats and hides were carefully placed over the poles so rain and snow would shed without allowing a drop to enter the lodges. Fire pits were built. Racks for drying meat were taken out of storage and repaired. Fine boughs and grasses were gathered to place under hides to make warm and comfortable beds. Everyone had work to do, and all were happy and excited about their return to their beautiful valley. Soun rode a horse over a familiar trail as he watched the hungry herd of horses and cattle feed on the tender, sweet spring grass. The mare he had watched so closely all winter grazed just below him. Soun stopped his horse and took a careful look around the open meadows. He noticed how large the mare looked, her sides bulging. It wouldn't be long now before the foal would be born. Soun planned to watch the mare during every spare minute he had. The summer of 1872 would bring events that would soon change the life of every Wallowa Nez Perce. Many white men would come and take Nez Perce land for their own. They were already living in many places in the valley, building fences, cabins, and farm buildings. Soun heard his father, his uncle, young Chief Joseph, and the other village leaders talk about the white settlers and how to get them to stop taking Nez Perce land. Some of the younger men wanted to drive the white men out with weapons. Others favored telling the settlers to leave or face death if they refused. Young Chief Joseph listened to everyone. He said he would have a council with the whites and ask them to leave in peace. Soun was troubled by the words he heard, but he forgot all of this on his trips away from the village to check on the horses. This was the time for birth in the herd. Several mares had already had their foals. On a cold, rainy morning, Soun was up early as usual. He ate dried salmon and 2 cow's root biscuits. He ate quickly and was on his way to see the horses and find the big mare. Soun kept moving to stay warm on his chilly, damp morning. It took him a long time to find the mare. It was the middle of the morning when Soun found her near a small grove of trees. She was not grazing and stood quietly near the trees, looking straight ahead. Soun had an extra robe of hide to put over his shoulders to help shed the cold drizzle. He found a place where he could crawl under the overhanging branches of a large fir tree. Soun sat down on the dry needles under the trees and watched the mare. The beautiful horse moved very little as time passed slowly. Many thoughts went through Soun's mind as he sat quietly. He thought about the day he sat next to his grandfather and heard him promise the gift of his very own horse. Would this be the day his foal would be born? Would it be a colt or a filly? Would the foal be strong and healthy? What color would it be? As Soun daydreamed, time seemed to pass very slowly. Suddenly, he forgot about time. The mare began to move about a little. She started breathing quite hard. It was time for her to give birth. Soun was only 50 feet away as he watched closely. The mare moved under the branches of a nearby tree to get out of the cold rain. Soon she knelt down and lay on her left side. Her breathing became faster. Soun forgot about the cold and the rain as he watched anxiously. The big mare raised her head several times and looked back as if to see her foal. Each time, Her head went back to the ground in a resting position. How long Soun sat and watched, he did not know. His great excitement erased the meaning of time. Then the birth started. Soun watched in amazement as a wet, dark form began to protrude from the mare's body. In only seconds, the foal's head was out, followed by the forelegs. For a moment, the birth seemed to stop, only to begin again until the squirming foal fell free to the ground. The baby horse was very wet and clung to parts of the mom's body. A little blood could be seen. Right after the birth, the mare got to her feet and turned to look at her newborn baby. She gently lowered her head and began to lick the foal to clean it and help it get dry. Soun watched all this, unaware of anything else that was happening around him. He didn't even notice the sudden break in the clouds and the sun peeking through the opening. Soun was on his feet, trying to get a better look at the foal. His excitement was the greatest he had ever felt. Only a few minutes had passed since the birth and already the foal had its head up. Soon it started trying to get its legs underneath its body as it could stand up. The struggle to stand up was the next part of this fascinating scene. As the foal began to raise itself from the ground for the first time, Soun could see that the newborn was a colt. The frail little fellow was weak and awkward on his wobbly legs. His body seemed to be too small. He looked like he was all legs, and they were too thin and shaky to support him. His mother nuzzled him and continued to lick him clean. The foal had been standing only a short time when suddenly his legs seemed to fold up and send him back onto the ground to start the struggle all over again. Once again, the foal worked his legs underneath his body. This time, it did not take as long for the foal to get to his feet. With each passing minute, the foal became steadier. He kept his legs spread apart to keep his balance. Next, he moved a little and was soon poking his head beneath his mother's stomach to begin nursing. For the first time since the excitement began, Soun took his eyes off the amazing scene. The sun was now shining brightly. The storm clouds had moved east. About a dozen curious horses were standing side by side in a row, sniffing the air. They were looking at the new arrival of his mother. When one of the mares got too close, the foal's mother laid her ears back and moved toward the intruder, ready to fight. The curious mare backed away in a hurry. Soun knew the many dangers to newborn horses. All of these dangers did not come from wild animals. Some of the threats up to the foal's life could come from other horses in the herd. A dry mare without a foal might try to take the colt away from his mother. Even a gelding might try to do the same thing. If a horse succeeded in stealing the colt, he could starve to death without his mother's milk. Soun walked slowly around the trees toward the other horses and chased them away. He would come every day to make sure the foal was safe with his mother. On the special June day, the sun had come out at almost the same time the foal was born. Soun thought about this sudden change in the weather as he moved into the warm sunshine for a little closer look at the awkward little horse. The mare had moved into the sunshine also and stood quietly as the foal nursed. The curious horses did not return. They went back to grazing. Soun stayed near the mare and the foal for hours. He could see that the colt had beautiful markings. His shoulders and head were dark gray like his mother. His face was a lighter gray with a bright white spot just above his eyes. Most unusual of all were the beautiful markings on the right hip. There, Soun saw a large circle of white with short rags of the white coloring coming out of the circle here and there. It looked much like the sun and its rays of light. The circle of white had black and gray spots, large and small, sprinkled through it. As Soun thought about the sudden end of the rain and the coming of the sunshine and the sun-like markings on the foal's hip, he knew what he would name the colt. His name would be Sunburst. No other name would fit this special colt. Soun was eager for the day to come when he could go close to his colt and even touch him. For now, he would have to just watch from a safe distance. The colt needed time to learn about the world from his mother. It was late in the day when Soun finally returned to his village. He hurried to tell his father the news. Olacott watched proudly as his son's hands moved quickly and gracefully, telling the whole story of the birth of Sunburst. "This is a great day for you, Sound Token. Your grandfather loved you greatly. Now he still tells you of his love with the special gift. When it is time, train your colt to obey. Train him to do as you command. Ride with you, your back straight and your head high, all the days of your life. Remember the love of your wise and kind grandfather." The boy listened carefully to the words of his father. He never felt happier. He ate his evening meal quickly and rode a horse back to the meadow to spend 2 more hours watching the mare and Sunburst. Soun was up early every morning. He hurried out to the herd to do his work. He checked for any signs of danger to the horse. He could easily pick out the mare and Sunburst even from a great distance. There were hundreds of horses scattered over the wide meadows. Still, Soun never had trouble finding his colt. Sunburst grew stronger and bigger every day. His long legs became sturdy and sure. He loved to run and play with the other colts and fillies, but he was always careful to keep his mother in sight. One day, Soun came with a buckskin bag with grain in it. The mare was easy to attract to the bag. She ate from the bag while Soun held it out to her. Sunburst, watching every move the boy made, stood behind and off to one side of his mother. His ears were turned forward, his dark eyes concentrated on Soun and the bag he held. Slowly, the colt moved closer, with his nostrils opening and closing as he sniffed the air. He came almost close enough to touch the bag with his nose. Then, suddenly, he pulled his head back and galloped away, running in a large circle around Soun and the mare. This was the beginning of Soun's plan to get the colt to come up to him without being afraid. The boy came every day and did the same thing each time. He always held the grain bag still. He never made any quick movements. Soon, Sunburst was feeding from the bag like his mother did. That summer, the 7-year-old boy spent all his spare time watching the colt feed, romp and play, and grow bigger. Soon Soun was able to stroke the colt's neck while the horse ate from the bag of grain. It was an exciting and happy summer for this Nez Perce boy. This same summer of 1872 was not a happy one for young Chief Joseph and the Walawat Nez Perce leaders. With many more white settlers in the valley came more arguments over who owned stray cattle and horses. To avoid war and bloodshed, Joseph asked the white settlers to meet the Nez Perce leaders in a council on August 14th. Soun watched as the Nez Perce men, dressed in their finest outfits, they rode their best horses and sat straight and tall in their saddles. Even the colorfully decorated horses seemed to know that this was a special event. They pranced and threw their heads high as they moved toward the site of the council with the whites.